Welcome to another episode of BHP Book Club. I am your host, Kelly Morgan. Today I'm excited because I'm speaking with author, Reverend, and Dr. Karen Herrick. Now, Karen has written 3 wonderful books. One of them is called Grandma, What is a Soul? The second one is called Youre Not Finished Yet. And the third one is called Psychology of the Soul and the Paranormal, all available on Amazon. Karen is the director of the Center of Children of Alcoholics in Red Bank, New Jersey. She has a master's degree in social work from Rutgers, and she also has her PhD as well. I'm so glad that she's here to share her writing story and her books with us. So let's get right to it. Welcome to our book club, our newest member, author, Reverend, and Dr. Karen Herrick. Karen, thank you so much for being a part of the book club and being on my podcast. Welcome.
Thank you. I'm looking forward to it.
I'm really looking forward to speaking with you about your 2 books, actually your 3 books, but I had a chance to glance at Grandma, What is a Soul? I think that's such a great book for kids, right?
Right.
And you said that you and your grandson wrote that together.
Yes, that's right.
And then your other book, Youre Not Finished Yet. That is a compelling title. I like that. And so I can't wait to get into that. And then your third book you can touch on is Psychology for the Soul and the Paranormal, which is also a very intriguing topic. So you've got a lot going on. So where do where did all this start? Like, how did your writing journey start?
Okay, well, I finally got a master's in social work with a specialization in alcoholism. And so I started teaching and having clients that were coming because of living in an alcoholic or dysfunctional home. And then people start after a few years, well, how do you do this? Because it works. And the other therapists would say, what exactly do you do? And I don't know. I mean, I just did what I was taught to do at Rutgers and in all my other classes. So I started thinking about what is it that I do, right? And then a client came in and she wanted to write a book. So we were doing sessions and she was using those sessions to write a book. And my secretary got her a publisher by saying, go to this talk on such and such a night and a publisher's going to be speaking. So she got a publisher. And then she told her publisher that her therapist wanted to write a book, and he said he would publish it. Now, he has since gone out of business, so the book reverted to me. But that's how I started to write You're Not Finished Yet, which was what my mother said about me because I was born premature. And I didn't have eyebrows and I didn't have fingernails and toenails. So I wasn't finished.
So tell me, what is the book You're Not Finished about? I know that it's nonfiction, right? And is
yes,
it more
it's
like
nonfiction.
would you call it a self-help book?
Yes, it's a self-help book. And the first chapter is on alcoholism and what is an alcoholic and what is a social drinker, because many people are confused about that. And then the second chapter is about the roles in the family that the kids take on. You know, there's the hero, the scapegoat, the lost child, the mascot, and the placater. And the kids take on those roles in the alcoholic home, and then those roles become their survival in childhood, but then they become problematic as adults.
So what is the difference between an alcoholic and a social drinker? Just out of curiosity.
Well, there's a whole chart, 5 columns, but basically it's my idea. I always say, well, what's your definition of an alcoholic, right? And mine is, if you're having problems in your life as a result of drinking, then you have a problem. So you could be a problem drinker, or you could go into the stage of alcoholism. And in most of those cases, the key characteristic is denial. I don't drink that much. Your brother drinks more than I do. Why are you on my back? You know, that kind of stuff.
Interesting.
But anyway, we have there's many 5-column assessment sheet in that first chapter that can say, have you had this? Have you had that? Did you have a DWI? Have you missed work? Or a lot of people go to work, they never drink from 9 to 5. And as soon as they get home, they drink until midnight. So, everybody, it's a very unique disease, and I believe it is a disease because the American Medical Society made it a disease when people would lose their marriage, their job, anything, just to continue to drink.
So is Youre Not Finished Yet specifically about being in an alcoholic home and alcoholism?
Well, the first chapter is that, but then I explained that any home where your emotional needs weren't met is a dysfunctional home. Because after I wrote that, people came in and said, well, I have these characteristics, but nobody drank in my house. But the parents had some other, maybe they were religiously addicted, or maybe they had money problems, or maybe they just worked too much, and the emotional needs of the children were not met. So that's the key to an alcoholic or dysfunctional home.
And so that book is out and available on Amazon. Are you finding that from this book, you could write a second book just from all the information that you've gathered over the years? Now that you've written this book, did not more questions or more subjects spring from that?
Well, they probably did, but I was really busy having a full-time private practice and kids and grandkids. Now I have great grandkids. And so what happened was I got a PhD, decided that I'd had a spiritual experience, and then people started coming to me with these weird stories of things that had happened to them. They weren't lying to me. They were spiritual experiences because they did affect them very much in a positive way. I thought, if I had one and they're having them, I want to study this. So I found a place to do that, and I got a PhD from Union Institute and University in Cincinnati. And my thesis was naming spiritual experiences. So all the different types of things that happen to people, whether it's near death, out of body, or just a mystical experience where you feel close to God or an angel or whatever happened to you, you can label it, because if you can name something when they come in and you have characteristics, then it isn't so weird. And, people think that, I'm if I tell you this story, I don't have the words, number one, to tell you because I've gone to a different dimension. But once I tell you this story, you're going to think I'm crazy. And that's what they say, and then they tell you. And then I say, well, I'm qualified to tell you whether you're crazy, and you're not. Because this has happened to a lot of people. You just have to be careful who you talk to about this.
Yeah, that is so true. Is that part of the experience that prompted you to write the book with your grandson?
Well, no, actually he prompted me because, you take him on, he's in the back seat. They have to ride back there till they're 18. And one day he says, Grandma, I don't like to talk about this very much, but I don't want you to die. Well, we'd never talked about it, and I could tell he was afraid. But I thought it was great that he said it, right? So this is when I had a PhD in spiritual psychology. So I thought, well, I ought to be able to handle this. So I said, well, you have to be really, really old to die usually. And I'm not that old yet. I said, but when I get really, really old, my soul will come back to watch over you. So he says, Grandma, what is a soul? So then we had to have that conversation. So it was about 20 minutes. And then synchronicity has it, 2 weeks later, I was up in the spiritual organization, and the newsletter chairman writes and says, if you know how to explain a soul to a child, please send in the story for the next quarterly, whatever journal. So I thought, we just had that conversation. So I wrote out the story and I sent it in. And then, of course, it doesn't get published for 3 months. You forget about it. And then they published it with 3 other answers. And the other answers were kind of boring. But when I read what Duncan had said, because he asked all these questions and I answered them, it was the child really explaining to you what the soul was, and then saying, oh, that's great, or but Grandma, won't you get bored up there? And, those kinds of questions. I thought, you know what, I'll just publish this for him. And then in the back, there's a part for adults. So if parents want to read that first, where I got the information from, and then read the child section before they decide if they want to give it to their child. But big children read it too. And I give it to them, I say, read the children's book part, before you go to sleep tonight, and then see what you think, and then read the other part later.
So did you find somebody to do like, because it's a children's book, so did you find somebody to do the graphics and the cover and all that stuff?
Yeah, I went with Amazon, and they had Create Something then. I don't know if they still have that, but down in the bottom of Amazon's website, it says work with us. So I went on there, and they had a whole list of illustrators. And so the illustrators would send you their samples. And so then I had, pictures, and I had ideas, and I just sent them to the illustrator, and we worked that way.
Nice. Yeah. So that book, when did that book come out?
Oh God, I don't know. What is it? 221? I have no idea.
So it's been out there for a while.
Yeah, it was after 2009. So yeah,
nice.
I don't have the books here. I could tell you. I'm sorry.
No, I like it when how you say that you wrote the book with your grandson, and how really it was him teaching you, so
just asking the right questions.
And kids are like that. They're incredibly inquisitive and have a lot of questions. And I think it's great when they start asking questions. And I think it's great that those questions manifested into a book.
And I got great reviews on that book from Charles Tart, who's the head of transpersonal psychology. I mean, he has to be 80 now, and he was one of my professors years ago, in my transpersonal program. And he wrote, if he had ever been able to explain to his grandchildren, he would have done it that way. And he said that my book, the children's book, was so much like his book, which is really thick, and that I had the same, characteristics that he talked about. Well, I looked at that book, and I don't know what he's talking about, but I considered that was a great compliment. Because Charlie really knows his spiritual stuff.
And I really enjoy people who can write children's books. I think so. Hats off to you for being able to write not only the children's book, but then you have this other book, You're Not Finished Yet, which is about a completely different topic. It's a self-help book. So let me ask you a question. There's a lot of self-help books out there, but what does the book You're Not Finished With? Does it give you tips or suggestions on how to better yourself? If it's a self-help book, you provide steps in there that people can follow easily. They feel like they can start making changes. Yeah,
there's characteristics that you get coming from a dysfunctional home. And so how many of those do you have, right? Then there's the roles in the family. How many roles did you play? Because if you're an only child, you probably played all of them at some level. And then there's a value sheet in there. What do you value? And you have to pick out 20 items that you value. And you can add anything to the list because it's your list, but I just get you started. And after 20, you do 10, and then you do your top 5 values. And that's where you have the most problems with people, because, if you and I go to lunch and we're having a good time, we probably have some of the same values. But if you work with people and they have this set of values and you have this, you're going to have conflict, and then you need to know how to really negotiate that. There's a part about your dreams, and a Jungian worksheet on how you're supposed to look at your dreams, because he believes that the last thing that you dream is where your unconscious is telling you to go in your life. And usually the last thing that we dream is what we remember first. So, if you're trying to remember your dream, you remember that part, and then you go backwards. Then I have parenting, because people that come, this chapter on parenting, people that come from dysfunctional homes, they don't know how to parent. And there's this huge belief that there's a perfect parent out there, and they're always comparing themselves to that parent, That's not true. And then the last couple chapters are on spirituality, and how you really have to start to be honest with yourself. And there's somewhere in there's a part about consciousness and unconsciousness, and how therapy really works to bring your unconscious closer to your consciousness, so that you are a more integrated person.
So I know that therapy is becoming more popular. I can remember a time where it kind of had a stigma to it. And now I see that it's becoming more accepted. People are more accepting of understanding mental health and how that works. Do you find now that people are more receptive to your book and other self-help books, that people are really trying to kind of figure out, get to the root of their problem, I guess, and really figure out, because that's what it sounds like your book does. It sounds like it drives you to the root, maybe, or root cause of your problem, and then gives you ways that you can start to work on that and turn that around, because that to me would seem like a marathon. Be able to change things. It wouldn't happen, let's say, overnight or over 7 days. It would be a commitment that you would have to make to yourself.
Yeah. Well, of course, I've been in this business 35 years, so I've always had people that are interested in therapy. I think it runs the gamut, because, I know people think, well, I'm a therapist, so you must be a little crazy. And of course, then I get into, talking to spirits and mediumship. So then they think I'm crazy for sure. But I find that there's a lot of people now with this COVID thing that they have so much anxiety, that there's much more anxiety, and they don't realize that thoughts are things. So if you keep worrying and obsessing, you're going to make yourself sick. Yeah. And, I have somebody that said, my anxiety has really been out of the, off the roof today or something. I said, okay, I have allowed my anxiety to be off the roof today. I have allowed it. And you've got to learn to say that. So this is how I talk to them. If you don't learn to say that, you're just going to be a victim of it.
But is anxiety the same thing as fear?
I think fear is part of anxiety, sure. And we are fear-based.
Well, I was going to say, people say that fear, I've heard that fear isn't true, fear is an illusion, but some fears are very real, like COVID was a real fear for a lot of people, which I would imagine, which still is, right? And then causes anxiety, right, on top of that. So that's a lot to try to deal with, and then still function and go to work and try to raise your family and try to keep normalcy, I guess.
Yeah, sure. So how are we going to deal with it? Like we all go to work. We all wear a mask. We go grocery shopping. Now, some people do not. Some people have their groceries delivered. Some people don't allow anybody in their home. So you have to decide at what level you're going to deal with it, but then deal with it. Yeah. Don't sit around ruminating that it's not working for you, because this is the new normal. It is part of our life now.
Yeah, and you have to figure out a way to adapt and adjust so that you can cope, I guess is what I'm trying to say, so that you can keep going your day to day. And I think for me, it was really leaning on my spirituality, right? And really, really just spending a lot of time with myself. And I'm always comfortable with spending time with myself, but a lot of people are not. That's
right. Yes.
And so
so a lot. Yeah.
Go ahead.
A lot of introverts didn't mind COVID because finally they didn't have to listen to all these extroverts. And for like 10 months, they couldn't go anywhere. They loved it.
Right. So, but some people are not. And that's where I think for me, spirituality really plays a big part with COVID. And so I would just want you to, talk about your other book, Psychology for the Soul and the Paranormal. How did you come to write that?
That really came out of my PhD thesis of naming spiritual experiences. And then I started to really see the bigger picture, at least I thought. And Oprah said something one day. I listen to her sometimes, watch her on Sundays, Super Soul Sundays. And she said something about combining your soul with your personality. And I thought, yeah, that's right. You do have to do that. Because, of course, Jung believes in past lives, which I believe in. But this life, you have a personality, right? And you have a soul that I would think I've lived a few lives before. But this personality, you have to be able to decide what it is and then find out your soul purpose. And then, how am I going to do that? How am I going to do my soul purpose now that I know I have one? And he said, you have to live this life fully. So first you have to do all the things I said in You're Not Finished Yet. Decide what roles you were, what kind of negative behaviors did they teach you in that family. So many times I think we come in here to go through these parents who fed us, gave us enough that we lived and we survived. However, now we have trial by fire because so many things that they taught us, we have to shed off. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Right? And then we have to decide what we believe. And then nobody pats you on the back and says, thanks for thinking different things from me, right? And so anyway, so then you have that kind of, you're the weird one in the family or the one that doesn't, follow along, which, lots of people don't. So you have to decide who you are and then become comfortable with who you are. Then I think you can really decide about, well, I was lucky because I married an alcoholic, and I always said, because I watched my mother, and I always thought, I'm not going to be like my mother. So she was married to an alcoholic and she stayed. Not only did she stay, but, well, your father says, and your father this, and your father that. Well, why do we have to listen to him? I was only 9, and I thought, I'm not listening to him. He's not even walking straight. So I thought there was something really wrong with her. I didn't know what that was. And then when I married once and then got divorced and then married again, I married my alcoholic the second time. And when I realized about 8 years into it, I'm going to have to leave. And I had a pretty nice lifestyle, but I wasn't staying because it just damages your self-esteem. Because they can't say anything good about you, and they're constantly, drinking or getting over being drinking, and it's never right. No matter what you try to do, you can't make them happy because they're not happy.
Right.
So then I had to go through getting a divorce. Had 3 daughters, and in fact, I just told this story today. I wanted to go to college because my father didn't believe in educating women, but I graduated high school at 16, and he sent me to secretarial school because even he knew I couldn't go out at 16. So anyway, I went to secretarial school. So thank God now I type over 100 words a minute, and it's really helpful. But then I went to the women's center at the college, and they put me in this room. I said, I don't know if I should go to work or just go back to school, right? So they gave me this book that I had to read. And the first question was, if you had all the time and all the money in the world, what would you do? So I put, I'd go to school. So then 45 minutes later, the last question says, go back to question number 1 and do it anyway. So I did. And then that started the AA degree, the BSA degree, and then the master's degree, and then the PhD.
Nice. And so the book, Psychology of the Soul and the Paranormal, what do you mean by and the paranormal?
I mean, mostly I mean mediumship and going to psychics. But it could be any else that I've talked about, having any kind of spiritual experience, like maybe you left your body or you had a near death or, you had a mystical moment on the beach or whatever. Okay. But I started to study mediumship, and I had these people that were coming in and they were in such grief and had such guilt that after 8 or 9 months with me, we weren't moving that much. And, I often tell them, you have to move for the therapist too, because there has to be something in it for me. We can't just sit here and grieve forever. It's not going to work. So I want you to go to a medium. I strongly suggest it. And I had one client, a male, and they're the hardest to go anywhere. So, but I was lucky because I had his sister-in-law who went as soon as her sister died. And I said, now your sister, I knew that because I had her as a client. Now your sister-in-law went, and it really helped her, didn't it? Yes. So I want you to go. I don't know if your wife's going to come in. However, you had your parents die in the last year, and your aunt and uncle died 18 months ago. Somebody's going to come into you and tell you about, because he had so much guilt about the kind of husband he was. And nothing, no amount of discussion worked with that. So anyway, finally he goes. And he comes back in the next week. And I'm telling you, his shoulders were right up there. He was feeling so much better. She came in, she talked to him. She said it wasn't his fault. She had a heart attack. And who knew? She didn't know. And he'd been left children. She told him what children were going to cause problems and what to do to help the kids. And she wished him the best. And she told him he should find another partner. Well, the guy was so happy, so relieved that he didn't cause the heart attack. And then we could start really working. So I had several, and I always recommend mediums or psychics that I've been to, or my very dear friends have been to. I don't send them just to anybody cold. So anyway, then it just started working, and I thought, wow, this is something that the church is against, and my mother's against it, and I can't tell my grandmother, but it works. So that's when I decided to get the PhD and study mediumship. Where did it come from? It's spiritualist church from the 1840s and all that. And just put it out there that we have two bodies. We have a physical body and we have a spiritual body. And it says, St. Paul says in the Bible that you come in on the physical and you go out on the spiritual. And that's exactly what happens. And so I have illustrations in that book as you go through it that show you what the astral body looks like. And the astral body is stored in your solar plexus. And the vagus nerve, silver cord, is the channel from the top of your head down into your stomach. And when you leave your body, you are on a molecular level, atomic, with chemicals. You're not a person, but it's made into a person that if somebody could see it, if they had the clairvoyant ability to see it, they would see a little miniature of you. And the whole point of that spiritual body is to take your soul up to the other side when you die. But now we have people that are going up there and having near death and leaving their body, and all kinds of things are happening. So I really believe that the higher energy, or God, or whatever you want to call it, wants us to know that there is a spiritual side to life.
I believe that as well. I do. And I think that when you first went to a psychic or a medium, was the first time you went, were you convinced that it was true? Because there are people who portray themselves to be mediums who are not. So the first time that you went, when you were seeking whatever, did you find what you were looking for, Karen?
Well, I got answers, right? Now you go to a psychic if you want to find your keys, or you want to know where your grandmother left the money in the attic after, before she died. You go to a medium if you want to talk to your grandmother, right? So I would usually go to psychics and I would have a question, something that was bothering me about me or one of my kids or whatever. Now, so how does that work really? Now we have three universes that I believe are here. So we have the sensory materialistic world. You and I are speaking in that world right now, and there's a past, present, and future. Mm-hmm. And everybody can see what we're doing if they're watching us. Then you have the clairvoyant world, which usually only happens to one person. Okay? In the clairvoyant world, you have psychics and mediums who usually inherit this gift that they have. Now you could also fall on your head and get it, or be in a car accident, but usually you inherit it. And you've been considered weird most of your life, but you do talk to spirits. Then there's a transpsychic world where I believe miracles happen. Okay? So, but in this clairvoyant world, there's the now, where you just experience being in the now. What does that mean? It's no past, present, and future. You're just there. Now, how do we know that we're in a different place? Okay, so sometimes I would drive home from seeing a psychic and I would feel so good. And I would say to myself, Karen, you don't know that anything that she said is going to come true. You have no idea. Why are you happy? And didn't have an answer. So then I read that in the sensory world, you make an appointment to see a psychic or a medium, right? So that's just an appointment. That's what we do. So then you go see her, and then you assume that everything she's telling you is coming from the sensory world, but it isn't. It's coming from the unconscious, from the paranormal, all the stuff where she gets in another dimension from spirits. However, we don't think about that really when we do it. You just go to a psychic. You don't think, how is this working? That she's getting this information, and I'm happy because I'm in the now with her. It's just great. There's no worries in there. We're laughing. We're talking about all the things that are possible. And you do get ideas in there that you normally wouldn't get if you just stayed at home and ruminated. So you come out with some possibilities.
Yeah.
And then you drive home, right? And then the possibilities, you try them and they make you happy. So you can go to a medium or psychic, you can go to a numerologist, you can go to an astrologer, you can go to a tarot card reader, and you can go to the I Ching person. So those 6 things you can do, and that helps get you into the 4th dimension.
Do you believe that everybody has the ability, or everybody can, in fact, download answers from spirit? Because they always say, like, when you meditate, and if you just find stillness, and if you ask questions, the answers will come, right? To me, that's a download from spirit.
It is. No, I do believe that. I don't believe everybody can do it because they don't do it, right? They don't believe they can do it. Christ said we could do it. And I think Christ was psychic and a medium. I mean, he read people and he healed them. That's clairvoyant ability. So I do believe that we need to be able to judge these experiences that happen by a different standard than, quote, real, unquote, science. Because we can't make these things happen in a lab. So we have to have a different way with clairvoyant researchers who can see what's going on and explain it to us, along with our scientists, and see if we can't get a different standard to prove to people that these do happen. But people's stories tell you that it happens.
Yeah.
And you know people aren't lying to you.
There's just too many of them, and some of them are very similar in the things that people experience, and there's a lot of stories out there, and I don't think anybody, I could never figure out why anybody would just make that up, right? It's just some of those stories I believe. So Karen, thank you so much for being on the podcast. I'm so happy to meet you. The 3 books are Grandma, What is a Soul? Youre Not Finished Yet, and Psychology of the Soul and the Paranormal, all available on Amazon?
All available on Amazon, and the last one is on Kindle, so they can hear my lovely voice if they want. Wonderful.
Yes, I think audiobooks are fantastic. So yes, good for you. Again, thank you so much for being on the podcast and being a member of the book club. I appreciate you.
Well, thank you so much. I've enjoyed it very much.
Thank you for listening to another episode of BHP Book Club. I have been your host, Kelly Morgan. I just wrapped up with author Karen Herrick as we talked about her 3 books, Grandma, What is a Soul? Youre Not Finished Yet, and The Psychology of Soul and the Paranormal. All are available on Amazon. If you are an author and you would like to promote your book on the podcast, it's really easy. You can go to my website at www.brightheadedpublishing.com, go to the contact section and drop me a note. We'll connect, and maybe you'll be the next member of the book club. Next week we have another author, but as always, until then, keep writing.